Kai crouched behind a jagged rock formation, his heart beating faster than usual. The sun of Dravana 7 glinted off the red dust, casting long shadows across the canyon walls. From this vantage point, he could see the training ground where Varia, the warrior woman of the Serac clan, practiced. She was known across the sector for her unmatched skill with a plasma sword and her icy, almost untouchable demeanor. Kai had been sent to scout this planet for the humans' new frontier outpost, but he hadn't expected to come face to face with one of the most fearsome fighters in the galaxy. He peeked cautiously over the rock, careful not to make a sound. Varia moved with fluid precision, her silver-bladed sword slicing through the air as if it were an extension of her body. Each strike, each twirl was exact. Kai marveled at her skill. He had seen combat before, of course, but nothing like this. Every movement was disciplined, and yet there was a grace to it, almost as if she were dancing. Kai had only planned to observe from a distance. He knew better than to confront her directly. Still, curiosity gnawed at him. He wanted to understand her, to know how someone so strong and disciplined could exist in this harsh, lawless place. Humans were not as physically imposing as the Serac, but they had other ways of surviving, other ways of thriving. Quick thinking, ingenuity, and, sometimes, sheer audacity. Kai counted on all three. He shifted slightly to get a better view, and that's when it happened. A small pebble slipped from under his boot and skittered down the canyon slope. It bounced off a rock and clattered loudly against the hard canyon floor. Varia froze mid-strike. Her eyes snapped toward the sound, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch. Kai's stomach dropped. He had expected to be careful, but this careless noise had given him away. He ducked lower, hoping the shadows would hide him. The next instant, Varia moved like lightning. Her plasma sword hummed through the air, catching the sunlight in a dazzling arc. Kai had just enough time to roll behind the rock completely. He pressed himself against the cool surface, trying to appear as small and non-threatening as possible. "Show yourself!" Varia's voice rang out, clear and commanding. Even from his hiding spot, Kai could feel the authority behind it. It wasn't just loud, it was sharp, disciplined, and fearless. He swallowed hard, knowing that trying to argue from concealment would only make things worse. Kai stepped out slowly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Wait, I mean no harm," he called, his voice steady even though his heart raced. He had to think fast. Humans weren't the strongest in this region of space, but they could be clever. "I'm just a scout from the human colony. I didn't mean to intrude." She studied him carefully, her posture rigid, her sword still poised for attack. Kai noticed the small signs of her scanning, how she weighed his movements, assessed his posture, and tried to predict his next action. He realized he had a very short window to convince her that he was not a threat. Kai tried to appear as unthreatening as possible. He lowered his hands, his voice calm and even. "I promise I'm not here to fight. I only wanted to observe. I've heard tales of your skill. I wanted to see for myself how impressive you are." He immediately realized his mistake. Varia's eyes widened, and for the first time her formidable demeanor faltered. Her hands twitched on the hilt of her sword, and the weapon dropped with a small clang onto the canyon floor. Varia covered her face with both hands, hiding her reaction. Kai froze, realizing what he had just done. "Oh, I mean," he stumbled over his words, trying to backtrack. He had never seen a warrior like this react so humanly. Normally, she would have attacked instantly without hesitation. Yet here she was, embarrassed, hiding her face, and somehow vulnerable. The canyon was silent except for the faint hum of her plasma sword lying on the rock. Kai took a careful step forward, lowering his hands again. I didn't mean to offend. I was trying to say that your skill is impressive, not—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence without making it worse. Varia finally lowered her hands slowly. The faintest tint of red touched her cheeks, something that humans could recognize immediately: embarrassment. She picked up her sword again, but her movements were slightly hesitant, as if she were still collecting herself. Kai took another step closer, trying to show he was sincere. "It's okay if you don't want to talk. I didn't expect anyone to be out here training like this. I respect it." He smiled gently, hoping to ease the tension. For the first time, Varia spoke, her voice quieter than before. You humans are strange," she said, the words almost a whisper. Kai couldn't help but chuckle lightly. Humans were often described as unpredictable, and apparently she had just realized it firsthand. "I'll take that as a compliment," Kai replied, smiling wider. He realized that this moment, brief as it was significant. Humans might not have the strength of her people, but they had the ability to reach others in ways brute force never could. A word, a gesture, a small act of empathy could change the outcome of an encounter just as much as a sword swing. Varia's stance relaxed slightly, though she did not smile. She kept the sword at her side, not in attack position. "You are bold," she said finally. "Many would have fled by now, many would have died." There was a moment where neither spoke, just the soft wind sweeping through the canyon and the distant echo of her sword's hum. Then slowly she sheathed it, the sound crisp and deliberate. Kai let out a silent breath of relief. He had survived the encounter without injury and, more surprisingly, he had managed to leave an impression on someone who rarely showed vulnerability. "Why did you call me sweet?" Varia asked suddenly, tilting her head. There was curiosity in her tone, a hint of something Kai had not expected, amusement. Kai shrugged, trying to appear casual. "I didn't mean it in a bad way, it just slipped out. Humans sometimes speak before thinking. You've caught me off guard." He smiled again, hoping to convey honesty. "And maybe it's because I've never seen a warrior move like you. You're graceful, and that, well, that's sweet in its own way. Curiosity is what keeps us alive. We explore, we learn, we understand. It's not weakness, it's what makes humans strong. But right now, I think talking is better than fighting." He glanced at her sword, still sheathed. "For both our sakes." It was a small victory for understanding, and a reminder of what humans could achieve. Connection, even in the face of danger. Varia finally broke the silence. "You speak boldly for a human," she said. "Few have the courage to face me without fear, most tremble or flee." Humans have learned that sometimes courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. And sometimes being clever is better than being strong. You may have strength, but humans have other ways. The tension that had crackled in the canyon moments ago was gone, replaced by something more neutral, or perhaps even cautiously approving. Kai felt a sense of triumph. He had survived an encounter with one of the most feared warriors in the sector, and had done so using only words, calm thinking, and a little accidental charm. Humans might not have the raw power of the Serac, but they had creativity, adaptability, and the courage to act in unexpected ways. The sun continued to descend toward the horizon, casting long shadows and turning the canyon a deep orange. Kai knew he couldn't stay here forever. The settlement he was scouting was still many hours away, and he had to return with information. But as he turned to leave, he noticed Varia watching him, not with hostility but with curiosity. For the first time, Kai realized something important. Human impact wasn't measured only by strength or weaponry. Sometimes it was measured by the ability to reach others, to influence without force, and to leave a mark on someone who seemed untouchable. He gave her a small wave and a nod. "I'll be careful," he said, "and thanks for not impaling me." Either way, Kai knew this encounter was only the beginning. Humans survived not just by strength, but by daring, by thinking differently, and by daring to reach others where others couldn't. And Kai was certain that somehow this warrior woman, Varia, would come to understand that too. The canyon fell silent once more, but Kai's mind buzzed with possibilities. He had survived, he had learned, and in some small way he had changed the course of someone else's day. For a human, that was victory enough. Kai had barely made it a few hundred meters from the canyon when he heard the soft hum of movement behind him. He stopped immediately, crouching low among the jagged rocks. For a moment he thought he had been followed by a scavenger or some wild creature, but then he realized it was something far more unusual. Varia. The warrior woman had not returned to her training ground. Instead, she was quietly walking behind him, keeping her distance but observing closely. Her silver plasma sword was sheathed, but her posture was rigid as if every muscle remained prepared for sudden action. Kai felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had not attacked him, yet. Kai decided to speak first. "You didn't need to follow me," he said, keeping his voice calm and friendly. "I can manage my own path." "I was curious," she said simply. Her tone was neither hostile nor warm, just neutral, though Kai could sense the faintest undercurrent of something he could not quite name. Embarrassment, maybe. Kai smiled gently. "Curiosity is very human," he said. "We always want to understand. Sometimes it gets us into trouble." He shrugged. "But sometimes it helps us survive." "I am not like other humans," she finally said. Her voice was quieter than before, almost a whisper. "They would have fled or attacked. You are unusual. We find new solutions, even when things look impossible." Yet here she was, listening to a human speak about human strength in ways that had nothing to do with a sword or combat. They walked together for some distance, the canyon walls forming natural corridors around them. Occasionally, Varia would glance at Kai, her eyes assessing him with cautious interest. He noticed subtle details about her movements, the way she adjusted her footing on loose rocks, the careful way she carried her sword even when it was sheathed, the faint tension in her shoulders that hinted she was always ready for sudden danger. Kai spoke again, breaking the silence. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," he said. I like to know who I'm traveling with. It's safer that way, and it's more interesting too. That's how we survive out here on planets like Dravana 7. He paused and glanced at her. Even when facing someone as skilled as you. She was still embarrassed about the previous day, the moment when Kai had called her sweet. He could tell, not just by her reaction, but by the slight stiffness in her movements when she walked. Kai decided to take a small risk. "You know, you don't always have to be serious," he said gently. "Even warriors can have moments of softness. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." "I just mean showing a moment of thoughtfulness or curiosity or even embarrassment. It doesn't make you less. It makes you more complete, more balanced." He gave her a small, encouraging smile. Varia's lips pressed together. She looked away briefly, covering her face with one hand again. Kai realized this was progress. Small, subtle progress, but progress nonetheless. The fearsome warrior was not attacking him. She was listening, she was considering his words, and she was reacting emotionally. As they walked, they came to a narrow pass where the canyon walls rose sharply on either side. Loose rocks littered the ground, and a sudden misstep could send someone tumbling. Kai gestured toward a safer path along the edge. "Careful," he said. "It's tricky here. We need to watch our footing." Then, without warning, a loud crash echoed through the canyon. Dust and small rocks tumbled down from above, and a group of alien scavengers appeared, their jagged weapons raised. They were the kind of mercenaries who attacked anyone who strayed too far from the main settlements. Varia immediately drew her sword, the silver blade humming to life. She moved to stand in front of Kai, a protective stance that surprised him. "Stay close," she said firmly. "I will handle this." "Humans can do that. Watch." He crouched low and began scanning the area. Using his knowledge of the terrain, he pointed out loose boulders and shadows. "If we move here, we can force them into a narrow spot. Then we can create a distraction. They won't expect it." "Perhaps your people are clever," she admitted grudgingly. Kai smiled. "Clever, yes, but that's not all. Humans also work together. We coordinate, improvise, and trust each other when it counts." He glanced at her. "If we work together, we can handle this without a fight if we are smart." Varia's sword flashed when needed, creating a controlled show of strength to scare off the scavengers. Kai used his knowledge of terrain and timing to outmaneuver the attackers. By the end of it, the scavengers were retreating, confused and frustrated, unable to catch either of them. Varia lowered her sword, her breathing steady but her eyes focused. She looked at Kai, a faint hint of respect in her gaze. "You humans are unpredictable and effective." Kai realized that this small victory, achieved through cooperation rather than combat alone, was significant. Humans might not have the raw strength of the Serac, but they had something equally powerful, the ability to think, adapt, and influence outcomes in ways others could not. Varia finally spoke again, her voice quieter, more contemplative. "I underestimated you. Not just your skill, but your mind. Humans are more capable than I thought." Kai knew she was still embarrassed about the previous day, still flustered by the word he had used. But now there was a subtle shift, curiosity mixed with cautious trust. They continued walking together, side by side, moving toward the human settlement. Along the way, they shared small conversations, each learning from the other. Kai taught her about simple human tools like a portable scanner and a navigation device. Varia observed, clearly impressed despite herself. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the canyon in deep reds and purples, Kai realized something important. This journey, brief though it was, had begun to change their dynamic. Varia was no longer just a distant, untouchable warrior. She was someone who could be influenced, guided, and even understood. And humans, he thought with a quiet smile, excelled at doing exactly that. As they reached a safe camp for the night, Varia finally allowed herself a small, shy smile. It was fleeting, but Kai noticed it immediately. "You are indeed unusual," she said softly, almost to herself. Kai grinned, settling near the fire he had built. "And you're learning that humans have a few tricks up their sleeves. Don't worry, I won't call you sweet again, not yet." For the first time, Kai felt that their partnership, unlikely though it was, might last longer than a single canyon encounter. The stars appeared overhead, scattered across the darkening sky like tiny diamonds. Kai knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and perhaps new revelations. But for now, he allowed himself to feel something rare and powerful, the quiet satisfaction of connection, of understanding, and of small, human victories. And somewhere in the shadows of the canyon, Varya considered that perhaps humans were not just fragile beings to be underestimated. They were clever, adaptable, and sometimes even sweet. The next morning, the canyon was quiet except for the soft hiss of the wind. Kai awoke to the faint glow of sunlight spilling over the jagged rocks. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at Varya, who was already awake, sitting cross-legged near the edge of the camp. She was scanning the horizon with her sharp eyes, alert and focused as always. Kai smiled quietly. She looked imposing even sitting still. Her posture was perfect, her silver plasma sword resting beside her, humming faintly. Yet there was a calm in her movements now that hadn't been there yesterday. A subtle trust had begun to form between them, even if it was tentative and unspoken. "Morning," Kai said, standing and stretching. He glanced at the horizon. "The path ahead is tricky. I think we need to cross the ridge before noon if we want to avoid the worst of the heat and the scavengers that roam this area. Strength alone won't get us through every challenge." He paused. "And sometimes it helps to have a partner who can handle a sword while you handle, well, everything else." This small allowance felt like progress, an acknowledgement that his presence and advice were acceptable, at least for now. By mid-morning, they were ready to move. The canyon floor opened into a narrow ridge, lined with loose rocks and steep drops. Kai led carefully, pointing out safe spots to step and warning of unstable stones. Varya followed closely, her movements precise and careful. She didn't always need his guidance, but she appreciated it, though she would never admit it outright. As they reached the top of the ridge, the wind picked up, whipping dust into their eyes. Kai covered his face with his scarf, squinting to see. Ahead, the terrain sloped down into a valley, but scattered across the path were jagged rock formations and shadows that hinted at potential danger. Suddenly, a loud screech split the air. Kai froze, scanning the area. In the distance, a group of scavenger drones appeared, hovering above the valley floor. Their sensors glinted in the sunlight, and their mechanical claws scraped the rocks as they descended. Kai's stomach tightened. These drones were programmed to attack anything moving in the canyon, especially lone travelers. Varya's eyes narrowed. Her hand went to her sword, but she didn't draw it immediately. She studied the drones, calculating their movements. "They are not strong individually," she said, "but their numbers and coordination make them dangerous. We must be careful. Follow my lead. Trust me. You strike when they're focused on me." Their sensors shifted toward the movement, leaving gaps in their formation. Varya waited for the right moment, then struck with deadly precision. Her plasma sword cut through the first drone's hull, sparks flying. The others hesitated, momentarily confused by the unexpected attack pattern. Kai used the opening to dash past the remaining drones, leading them toward the narrow gap. The drones' movements became clumsy in the restricted space. Varya followed swiftly, her sword flashing as she disabled 2 more drones with precise strikes. By the time the last drone fell, both of them were breathing hard but uninjured. Kai wiped sweat from his forehead, glancing at Varya. "Not bad for a human and a Sarak warrior," he said, smiling. Varya's lips twitched slightly, almost as if she were suppressing a grin. "You are clever," she admitted. "I underestimated your abilities. Humans are more capable than I believed." The encounter had shifted something between them. Varya was no longer merely a distant, untouchable warrior. She had seen Kai's thinking, his quick decisions, and his bravery. She could not deny the effectiveness of his methods, even if they were unconventional by Sarak standards. As the day wore on, they came across a small stream running through the valley. Kai knelt to refill his water supply and gestured toward Varya. "You should drink too. Staying hydrated keeps you sharp. Even the way you move, the way you watch for danger, you're efficient, but sometimes efficiency alone isn't enough. It helps to think ahead, to plan, to use creativity." She felt a strange mixture of respect and curiosity toward him, emotions she was unused to. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, they reached a dense grove of trees. Kai paused, scanning the area for potential dangers. "This place looks safe enough to rest," he said. "We can set up a temporary camp before moving on." Even in safe areas, vigilance is necessary. Despite her usual stoicism, Kai noticed subtle signs of relaxation. Her shoulders were less tense, her movements slightly more fluid. As they ate, Kai spoke again. "You know, you're not so bad at teamwork either. I didn't expect it, but you're adaptable. It's impressive." Humans appreciate honesty even if it's polite. You've learned a lot today, so have I actually. There's value in watching and learning from each other. We don't give up easily, and sometimes it helps us connect with others, even those who seem untouchable. The events of the day had shifted something fundamental: trust. Kai looked at Varia, noticing the faint blush still lingering from yesterday's accidental compliment. You know, calling you sweet might have been the best accident I ever had, he said lightly, grinning. Varia's eyes widened and she looked away, hiding her face with her hand. Do not speak such foolishness, she muttered, though her tone lacked the sharpness of before. Kai laughed softly. I only mean that humans have a way of turning unexpected moments into advantages, and sometimes it helps others see things differently, even warriors like you. She did not respond, but she allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Kai could see it, and it made him feel a quiet sense of accomplishment. As night fell, they settled into the camp. The stars above the canyon sparkled like scattered gems, and the soft hum of distant wildlife created a peaceful rhythm. Kai reflected on the day's events, realizing that human strength lay not just in survival skills, but in their ability to influence, to adapt, and to form connections that others could not. Varia, sitting silently beside him, seemed to consider the same lesson. She had seen firsthand the value of strategy, teamwork, and trust. And though she would never admit it aloud, Kai had begun to earn her respect, not through force but through thought, courage, and human ingenuity. For both of them the day had been a test, and both had passed. The morning air was crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of dust and stone from the canyon walls. Kai woke before sunrise as usual, his instincts telling him the day would be long and unpredictable. Varia had already been awake for some time, silently observing the valley below from a small outcrop near their camp. Her eyes were alert, scanning the terrain for any hint of danger. Kai packed his supplies quietly, careful not to disturb the warrior. He admired her vigilance. Humans often survived by noticing details others missed, but Varia's focus was something else entirely. Every movement, every shadow, every flicker of light seemed to be catalogued in her mind. She was disciplined, but Kai now realized that discipline could be complemented by adaptability. That was the strength humans brought to the table. You are early, Kai said softly, glancing at her. Varia did not turn. There is much to observe. Even in safe areas, threats may appear unexpectedly. I prefer to be prepared. Few would speak to me with such ease. The path was treacherous, but both Kai and Varia moved with confidence. Kai used his knowledge of terrain to pick the safest path, while Varia's keen eyes detected subtle signs of instability. Together, they formed a balance of intellect and instinct, strategy and skill. By midday, they reached a narrow canyon entrance partially hidden by overhanging rocks. Kai paused, noticing faint tracks in the dust. Something been here recently, he whispered, pointing to the prints. They were large and irregular, not human. Varia crouched, examining the tracks. Scavengers or predators, she said. Possibly both. They hunt in groups. We must remain cautious. If we stay alert and keep to higher ground, we can move past them safely. But we need a plan in case they notice us. We need to trust each other, Varia, if we are going to make it through this canyon alive. Kai moved carefully, watching for loose stones, hidden pitfalls, or ambush points. Varia followed silently, her sword ready but sheathed, her senses attuned to every sound. Suddenly, a sharp metallic screech echoed through the canyon. Kai froze. Varia's eyes narrowed instantly, and she drew her plasma sword with a swift motion, its silver blade igniting with a soft hum. From the shadows, a group of scavenger drones descended, more numerous than the last encounter. Their sensors glowed red, scanning for movement. Kai counted quickly. There were at least a dozen, all programmed for attack. This was no longer a simple distraction. They were surrounded. Varia's eyes met Kai's. Stay close, follow my lead. Understood. You are confident, human. I will follow your plan. Kai tossed small rocks at their sensors, creating confusion. One drone stumbled and collided with the canyon wall, sparks flying. Varia struck swiftly, her blade slicing through another drone's armor, sending it crashing to the ground. Kai darted along the ledge, throwing debris and guiding the drones toward traps he had spotted earlier, unstable rocks that collapsed under weight, small ledges that caused the drones to topple. Varia's strikes were precise and efficient, disabling the drones that attempted to advance. Despite the danger, Kai felt a thrill of exhilaration. Humans may not have the raw strength of the Serac or the drones, but their ingenuity, adaptability, and quick thinking gave them a unique advantage. Together, he and Varia were a formidable team. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the last drone fell, sparks and smoke rising from its damaged hull. Kai and Varia took a moment to catch their breath, surveying the scene. The canyon was silent once more, except for the faint hum of Varia's sword powering down. "You were effective," Varia said quietly, almost with admiration. "Humans are clever." She said nothing, but her gaze lingered on him. The trust she had begun to show yesterday had deepened today. She had seen the value of strategy, creativity, and partnership firsthand. They moved cautiously out of the canyon, but the dangers were far from over. The path ahead led to a dense forest at the base of a rocky plateau. Kai led carefully, noting every twist and turn, every shadow that could hide a threat. As they entered the forest, the air grew cooler, filled with the scent of damp earth and pine-like flora. Strange, glowing insects flitted through the underbrush, casting soft light on the path. Kai paused, scanning the area. "This place looks peaceful," he said, "but nothing is ever as it seems. Stay alert." Suddenly, a massive predator emerged, larger than any Kai had ever seen. Its armor-like scales glinted in the dim light, and its glowing eyes fixed on them. It hissed, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Kai froze for a heartbeat, then glanced at Varia. "We need to work together, distract it, slow it down, and aim for its weak spots. You take the front, I'll flank it." The predator fell, snarling but trapped. Varia struck one final blow to ensure it could not escape. Both Kai and Varia stood, breathing heavily but unharmed. Kai looked at her, awe in his eyes. "Humans may not be the strongest, but when we combine brains and courage, we can overcome almost anything. And you're learning that humans aren't just fragile creatures. We survive because we think, adapt, and trust." By evening, they reached a small clearing with a stream running through it. Kai knelt to drink, glancing at Varia. "We'll camp here tonight, rest, eat, and prepare for the next stage. We've earned it." She was still embarrassed, still stoic, but there was a subtle shift in her demeanor. She was beginning to see the value of partnership and maybe even human charm. As they settled near the stream, Kai reflected on the day's events. Humans survived not because of brute strength alone, but because of ingenuity, courage, and connection. They could adapt, improvise, and influence outcomes in ways others could not. Varia had witnessed this firsthand, and her respect, however subtle, had grown. Varia, sitting silently across from him, seemed to ponder the same lesson. She had faced danger with him, followed his lead, and survived. And though she would not admit it aloud, Kai had begun to earn her trust, not through force, but through human skill, courage, and ingenuity. The stars appeared overhead, scattered across the sky like glittering jewels. Kai felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had faced the canyon, the drones, and the predator together, and survived. Varia looked at him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. "You are unusual," she said softly. Kai grinned. "And you're learning that humans can be clever, resourceful, and maybe even a little sweet sometimes." The bond between them had grown stronger, tempered in fire, and now it was a foundation for something greater. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Kai knew one thing. Together, humans and Serac warriors could face anything and win. The first light of dawn filtered through the trees, casting long, golden rays across the forest floor. Kai stretched and yawned, feeling the fatigue of the past few days in his muscles, but also a quiet satisfaction. They had survived narrow escapes, dangerous predators, and relentless drones. Humans might not have been the strongest creatures in the galaxy, but their ingenuity, adaptability, and courage had carried them through. Varia had already risen, standing silently near the stream where they had camped. She had spent the night in quiet vigilance, though Kai noticed she relaxed her stance as the first birdsong reached their ears. Her silver plasma sword hummed faintly, a comforting reminder of the warrior's presence and skill. Kai approached, careful not to startle her. "Morning," he said softly. "You sleep less than humans, don't you? We can go far if we pace ourselves, and we have the ability to recover quickly, even after exhaustion. It's all about adaptation." He glanced at her. "And I think we've adapted pretty well together these past few days." Even subtle signs of respect and trust were enough to show progress. Their path that morning led toward the edge of the forest, where the terrain sloped upward toward a rocky plateau. The journey was not without its challenges. Loose rocks, narrow ledges, and steep slopes tested their coordination and trust. Yet Kai felt more confident than before. He knew Varia's movements were precise, disciplined, and reliable. In turn, Varya had begun to notice the human's ability to think, improvise, and influence outcomes in unexpected ways. As they climbed, Kai glanced at her. "We make a good team, don't we?" he asked lightly. Varya did not answer immediately. She adjusted her footing carefully, her sword humming softly by her side. Then she said, her tone quieter than usual, "Perhaps. Humans have strengths beyond strength. I have seen it. You think differently, and it works. Together, we survive where others would fail. That trust saved both of us. Sometimes more than our strength matters, even with warriors like you." As they reached the plateau, the wind picked up, whipping through the jagged rocks. Ahead lay the human settlement they had been traveling toward, a small cluster of domed structures and landing pads, safe and familiar compared to the wilderness they had just crossed. Kai motioned toward it. "Almost there. One final push." "I will follow." A minor landslide had begun, triggered by the shifting earth. Kai reacted instantly, grabbing Varya's arm. "Move left, there's a safer path." The experience reinforced their partnership. Brains and adaptability combined with skill and strength could overcome any danger. Finally, they reached the edge of the settlement. The human outpost lay ahead, safe, with guards patrolling the perimeter. The contrast between the wild, dangerous canyon and the structured, orderly settlement was stark. Kai let out a deep breath, feeling relief wash over him. Varya looked at the outpost, her expression thoughtful. "Your people build strongholds, protection and planning combined, efficient." She glanced away briefly, hiding a faint blush. "You speak boldly, human. Few dare to speak this way to me." "We're friends," he said simply, giving a brief explanation of the journey. The guards relaxed, allowing them inside. Once inside the settlement, Kai and Varya found a quiet spot near a small plaza. They sat, catching their breath, reflecting on the journey. The canyon, the drones, the predator, and the landslide, all of it had tested them, yet they had survived, together. Kai glanced at Varya, smiling. "You know, the first time I called you sweet, I didn't expect this. I thought you'd attack me immediately." That compliment, accidental as it was, opened a door to understanding and trust. That's what makes humans special. We might be smaller or weaker than some, but we can think, adapt, and inspire. And sometimes that's stronger than any weapon. Humans learn from each other too, and sometimes we teach even the fiercest warriors something new. They might not always be the strongest physically, but they had ingenuity, courage, and the ability to form bonds. Those qualities had saved both their lives. Varya finally spoke again. "I did not expect to feel this way, to learn to trust. Humans have surprising qualities. You survive because of more than skill, because of heart, mind, and connection. That's what makes humans human, and that's why we're valuable allies and sometimes unexpected friends. And you're learning that humans can be clever, brave, and yes, maybe even sweet sometimes." They had survived incredible challenges, forged a bond that neither had expected, and learned that humans' greatest strength lay not just in action, but in thought, courage, and empathy. Kai looked at Varya, smiling. "Tomorrow will bring new adventures, but for tonight we rest. We survived, we adapted, we connected. We survived together." Varya sat silently beside him, a warrior who had faced countless battles and yet had learned something new. Humans could be trusted, relied upon, and even admired. The bond between them, forged in the canyon and tested in the forest, was stronger than any blade, more enduring than fear. As night deepened and stars twinkled above, Kai knew that the adventure had changed them both. Varya had seen the value of human ingenuity and courage, and he had learned the subtle strength of a Sarak warrior. Together they had faced danger, survived, and emerged stronger. Kai smiled quietly to himself. Humans had a way of making the impossible possible, and now Varya understood that as well. For both of them, the journey had ended, but the story of trust, respect, and human ingenuity would continue. Kai glanced at her one last time before closing his eyes. Humans survive, and sometimes we even make friends with the fiercest warriors. And for the first time in a long time, both felt at peace, knowing that together they could face anything.